Engineering flaws. What are some common things about engineers that end up being a detriment to the engineering process? Well, I've got some ideas in my head that I'm going to talk to you about. Number one, I think this is a big one. I see it all the time and it's highly frustrating, and it is analysis paralysis. This happens to a lot of us, especially with an engineering or troubleshooting mindset, because what happens is you think of a solution and then you begin to think of counterpoints to that solution and counterpoints to those counterpoints. And what you end up with is quite a few different options and quite a large set of pros and cons in your head. And this can cause you to freeze and take no action at all because you're just thinking about it. Now, I don't know if there's a perfect good solution to this, but in general, I think what you have to do is limit your analysis time and then pick the best one off of that analysis. But once time's up, you have to be very firm. Like maybe you say, I'm going to research this for 1 hour. I'm going to pick the best method by 1 hour, set an alarm, set a timer, whatever you need to do, and then just take the action. So once you have it in place, like 90% of the time, I would say, I guess it depends on who it is, that action you pick after a limited research time will be very sufficient and often the best. Especially, it might be the best because you might just end up getting the thing done and off your mind so you could move on. All right, well, let me know your thoughts on the whole analysis paralysis thing. I think it's a big one, and it's one of the first things that popped in my head when I asked the question. So let's go on to number two. Number two, and I'm sure this one will cause at least a little bit of controversy, which is fine. Discussion's always good. How do I word this? Engineers often become very passionate about a very niche thing. And I think overall this is a trap to a limited extent. And you'll probably notice a theme by the end of this of me mentioning limiting things. And that's because that's just the way I handle things. So engineers will often get caught up in a technology or a theory or something like that. And sometimes this is a good thing to focus on, but oftentimes it's a rabbit hole. Like, how much can you really research about black holes? How many days can you spend on researching black holes before you just come to the conclusion that we really don't know? Because that's basically the conclusion. There's not a whole lot really to learn, but some people will go very deep into that subject. And the counterpoint to this is that, well, if we don't know it very well, someone's got to study it. And that's very true. But for the majority of people, you want to wait for the experts to weigh in because you can't be an expert in every field, and you got to kind of align with your goals. If you're not doing that, you're going to find yourself in problematic situations where you want to do something, but you can't seem to acquire the skill set. And I think part of that is you've just been studying some deep rabbit hole that doesn't really benefit you much, and you really just need to switch and learn the core technology. So I think that's the answer here, is to stick to the core. And this is not something I like to say because I'm not someone who typically likes the most popular people, although I might, it really just depends. But what you have to do here is learn the most popular and common ways of completing what you're trying to do. For example, if you're trying to make a business application, research the languages. Don't get stuck in analysis paralysis. Just do a tiny bit of research, pick one, dive in. You can analyze it again later after you've made your first app with it or whatever it is. But by that time, you're going to have a ton more knowledge, and it just scales really well when you continue to take action and don't get stuck in rabbit holes where you don't learn anything. So yeah, that's my second pick, is basically the rabbit hole problem. So what is the third thing now that engineers have a often very problematic flaw with? Well, for me, number three is not knowing where to start. Now, this has become a lot easier in modern times where you can Google search for guides and tutorials on any given thing, but that doesn't always suffice. Sometimes you want to do something truly unique, or there is no documentation on it, or you'll be the first one to write a blog on it or whatever if you actually do it. And that's not too uncommon for engineers to run into this problem where I want to do something, but I can't even figure out where to get started. Like, nobody's talking about this. I think it's important, but like, where do I go? And then you ask on Stack Overflow and it becomes a meme. You get 10 downvotes, a bunch of people saying, why would you want to do that? That is a problem. That is a problem that is not easy to solve all the time. If you want to do something new that you know is difficult, I think you have to either have an understanding of a starting point. And if it doesn't click, maybe this would be like the doesn't click problem, because I think it's a very real problem that doesn't get talked about. Sometimes a concept or something you want to do, you know what you want to do, but like how to do it won't click right away. And the way around this problem is basically to study and rest. And study and rest. I don't think there's any real shortcuts. It does take time, but basically you have to study things that lead up to the problem. Like if you want to understand trigonometry, trying to just jump to that is going to be so confusing if you skipped algebra. So you got to start like building blocks. And from what I understand of neuroscience and stuff that my limited knowledge has, I'm a computer scientist, not a neuroscientist. There seems to be a consensus among that community where you have to get deep, focused study in. And then you need to rest. If you don't get the rest afterwards, that deep, focused study like literally doesn't work. And I know that sounds crazy, but that is the way it is. You like need a lot of rest. Some people will say, no, I'll just study 24/7 until it clicks. And it will never click. You'll just die of tiredness. And that's not good. So but the drive is still kind of right. You still want to like really hone in on something, spend like some really focused hours where you know you're not going to get interrupted on this thing. It will build up, and maybe you won't even click the first day or two, but it's often in the morning when you come back at it that you'll notice that like you have a new understanding. And there's a reason why that's in the morning when you come back at it, that you feel like you have a new understanding, and that like you can finally fix that bug that you've been staring at all day. And it was actually really simple. There's a reason that happens in the morning and not like late at night when you're half tired and like wired on caffeine or whatever. So yeah, that's my pick for number 3. I know it was a little convoluted, but I think that's an important one. So let me see if I can conjure up one more out of this video for you guys. And please, if you want to support the channel, it would mean a lot. Just hitting the like button, leaving a comment would mean a lot. You could also join via the button or Patreon. There's a $3 tier that basically buys me a coffee or a beer every month, and I would really appreciate it if you would do that. It means a lot for this channel going forward. And there's also like a source tier, which is kind of a higher, another level. Number 4, the last thing, probably the last engineering thought flaw that happens. Oh, I got it. Okay, here's one. And I know this is a good one because it's happened to me, and I've seen people do it. I've seen people stuck in this way as engineers. I kind of want to tell a story, but I don't think the story is complete enough to tell. So I'm just going to try to explain the problem instead. What happens here is you find a general solution that tends to work a lot of the time. For example, this is just the one that comes to mind because I'm thinking of cars. You find that oil is a great lubricant for the internals of a car. So you start trying to apply that to everything. You're like, oh, you need some slipperiness in there? Put some oil in there. Oil. And obviously you know that that's a terrible solution to a lot of problems. You don't want to be cooking with motor oil. You don't want to be using it during fun time. It's technically correct. You want the thing to be more slippery. Just using oil as the example here. You try to apply motor oil to everything, but obviously that's wrong. So I think this happens a lot in a lot of different ways. That was just the example that came to mind. But like with programming, for example, say someone says, or you decide you want to build a website, but you only use one language. Maybe you only use Python. So you decide, I'm going to build my website with Python because it's a good general solution. And sure, you can like write a program that like spits out the right code or whatever for your website. But oh my, that's not a good solution, right? And I think this, that might be more debatable because Python being somewhat of a common server language, it might actually be a half decent idea. I'm not actually sure, but I'm willing to bet you get the point here. That just because it's a good general purpose answer doesn't mean it's the answer to everything with that same problem set in real life. Like, it's hard to think of more good examples here, but you can really apply this to anything if you ask the question, like, when the first planes were flown, maybe they thought, hey, birds have feathers. Let's put feathers all over each of our designs. And there might be some way that that would kind of work, but obviously we know now that we don't need to put feathers on planes. Fifth problem. Sometimes engineers like to have way too much stuff and not handle problems in real life because they're too busy working on problems in their head and on paper. Is that a real thing? I have definitely seen a lot of engineers have clutter, but I've also seen a lot of them that are like really neat. And I don't normally have clutter, but this is all temporary stuff. Most of it's not even mine. So that's all I'll say about that. Alright, peace out guys. See you in the next video.